Hi, welcome to the show. And these are the stories throughout the week that, you might have missed, or what I found interesting, or what I think you might find interesting. What the fuck is Japan doing with the Olympics? We are 5 weeks away. COVID cases were bad in May with 7,000 daily cases. Now that's since subsided. As of recording, that number now just hovers above 1,400 cases a day. As of Wednesday, only 6% of Japanese people were fully vaccinated. And if you're like me and you're thinking, oh Ryan, they'll cancel it, they'll postpone it, 83% of Japanese people don't want it. $150 million in those tickets. If that's what you're thinking, then you've missed the point just like me. It's about legacy, it's about reconstruction of Japan. And to better understand that, we need to look at 1964 Japan. It's a bit of a history lesson. Strap yourself in. 1964 is the year that Japan sees itself leaving the post-war era, post-World War II. According to reports, it suffered from a desperate shortage of housing and functional infrastructure. It had lack of flush toilets, which meant most waste had to be vacuumed daily out of cesspits underneath buildings by these trucks. In 1964 though, 100 kilometers of freshly laid highways, a new sewage system, new luxury hotels, and 21 kilometers of monorail from the new international airport to downtown was built. And I haven't even mentioned the best part. They built the first bullet train in the world this year. The Tokaido Shinkansen, breaking world records they were that year. It was the country's rebirth. And what else was happening in that year in Tokyo? The 1964 Tokyo Olympics. That played a huge part in all of this. But this time, in present day, with the 2020 Tokyo Olympics, it's not so much a war we're trying to come back from, but rather the 2011 Tohoku earthquake. A magnitude 9 earthquake, which caused, like dominoes, a tsunami, which then caused 3 nuclear meltdowns in one nuclear facility. Lots of water radioactive in the area, affecting hundreds of thousands of residents, and is still affecting them now. In total, that killed 20,000 people, over 6,000 were injured, and 2.5 thousand are still counted as missing. And because of that, these games have been dubbed the Reconstruction Games. Japan's Prime Minister Shinzo Abe was hinging everything on this. Prime Minister Shinzo Abe was hinging everything on this. His legacy and Japan's legacy. He said, I want to create momentum for Japan to rise in the world again. Baseball and softball matches will be held in the disaster-affected areas. One paper said now 1 year out, it would represent a major blow to Abe's legacy if he tripped at the finish line and experienced an early exit from the prime ministership before he is able to preside over the Olympics. Now, Fukushima was seen as one disaster, the nuclear disaster caused by that tsunami. Then abandoning the Olympics is really seen as another. And Abe obviously wasn't going to let that happen. Now, we need to understand his history. Abe came from a dynasty of landmark prime ministers. His grandfather was a post-war PM. His great-uncle was the longest-serving PM for a while. And Abe himself had a disastrous 1-year term back in 2006-7 that he had to make up for. Since his first year in 2012, his whole stance has been on growth and change and trying to, most importantly, show it to the world. And he's been doing that and trying to drive tourism from 8.6 million in 2010 to 31.8 million in 2019. Some of which is a pre-Olympic boom that countries often seen when they're about to hold the Olympics. He was the first prime minister to address US Congress in 2015. He's the prime minister that holds the most countries visited by any head of government in Japan, and he did it in half the time that the previous record holder had. He made radical changes to the Japanese economy, dubbed Abenomics, in a bid to try and see an upturn in a stagnant economy due to a shrinking and aging population, many of which had struggled with before him. To combat that, he pushed for more foreign work to be done in the country. One paper writing, and there are more than twice as many foreign workers in Japan as there were when Mr. Abe took office, despite a supposed national phobia about immigration. And it's not just all policy making, he's seen the Olympics from the start. He was famously photographed at the announcement of their winning bid, and then that weird cosplaying as Super Mario at the close of the Rio Games in 2016, as if to say, hey, these are mine now, these games are mine. He put credibility in Japan on the world stage, but this video really wasn't meant to be an Abe wankfest like it just sounded like it was, because he fucked off in the end. A chronic illness meant that he had to force to leave a year out from the Olympics a year ago, and he was replaced by Yoshihide Suga. Now, I don't really know how to keep saying that, so I'm going to call him Mr. Sugar. Even in Abe's absence, Mr. Sugar himself was Abe's right-hand man. He was his chief secretary. And Abe himself, he set in motion a momentum. He's laid the groundwork for this, and I don't see why Mr. Sugar wouldn't continue that. He's even publicly vowed that he will follow a lot of his policies. And putting Abe aside, Mr. Sugar is just looking at his own political longevity. His current approval rating sits at a nominal 37%. While that still beats Abe's prior to leaving, that number would surely take a hit with the fallout of a cancelled games. So what's happening right now? Well, it's happening. It's 5 weeks away. It's been capped at 10,000 spectators in sports and concerts in areas not in a state of emergency, or 50% venue capacity, whichever winds up being smaller. It's domestic fans only, and Tokyo and 8 other regions are currently leaving a state of emergency to a sort of quasi-emergency state. Ultimately, even if Mr. Sugar wants to carry on Abe's legacy, the IOC does have the final say according to the COVID-19 minister in Japan. So given the IOC allows him, it only makes sense that Mr. Sugar will want to carry on Abe's legacy, at least into the next couple of months. Postponement really doesn't seem like an option for them, given that the 2022 Winter Olympics are happening in February with their rival, China. So they don't want to be co-hosting Olympics in 1 year together. And that's really all I have to say. If there's any story you think I've missed, any vital piece of information that I've missed in any of these stories, I am a white male talking about Japanese policy and Japanese culture. So anything at all, comments below. Don't forget to subscribe. I'm probably not pointing in the right place. Yeah, thanks for watching. Till next Friday. Yeah.